Part 5. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 41. My powers can help soothe people's minds and inspire the kind and perseverance in people's hearts. In the smoke, Sun Yu's solemn and serious face was reflected. After the apocalypse, this hotel soon fell into a zombie crisis, but fortunately our resort hotel occupies a vast area, leaving us enough time to clean up the mutated zombies. It is true that some unpleasant things happened during this period, but fortunately with the help of my powers, the awakened people and ordinary people in the hotel can coexist equally and survive together. Sun Yu carefully explained the stories that happened in the hotel in the past 2 years. In his words, it was as if the hotel had really been built into a paradise in the apocalypse. Only Yu slightly squinted his eyes, and he deduced the hotel owner's strength the moment the light hit him. A B-level peak awakener. He has power but is not greedy. Instead, he uses his abilities to save survivors. Even the leaders of Yuhei base know how to use survivors to satisfy their own interests. Is this boss Sun really so selfless? Is there really such a great saint in the world? There are now more than 100 survivors left in the hotel. Most of these people were rescued by us in the past 2 years. They lived in our hotel and quickly became a part of the hotel. There are even other awakened people who are attracted by them. Come join us. After saying that, Sun Yu looked at Wei Linger and others, smiled kindly, and said, "The situation in the hotel is roughly like this now. Although life is not as happy as before the apocalypse, everyone can at least survive together. Of course. If you are interested in the hotel also welcomes you to join us." After Sun Yu finished speaking, he looked expectantly at the team members. Tianlai Novel Network. After all, if this team can join the hotel, it will definitely improve the strength of the entire hotel. As soon as these words came out, the whole team was completely defeated. They have always been the ones searching for survivors in the ruins, either recruiting or rescuing them, and bringing them back to the base. This is the first time that a survivor team has invited people from their search team to join. Concubine Lu Qing admired Sun Yu's actions very much and stepped forward and replied, "Thank you very much, Boss Sun, for your kindness, but our team still has a mission and we won't be able to stay here for too long. If Boss Sun needs any help, you can tell us, and we will report it to the base for help when we return to the base." Although the search team has the task of rescuing survivors in the ruins back to the base, this is all based on the needs of the survivors themselves, and the base does not insist on this. Sun Yu nodded to express his understanding, and then said, "In that case, I'll help you all. It's getting late. I have arranged accommodation and meals for you. Please rest in the hotel for one night and set off again tomorrow." Seeing this, everyone naturally found it difficult to refuse Sun Yu's kindness. The security guard took a few more people away. Before leaving, Yu, who was walking at the end of the team, turned around and suddenly gave Sun Yu a meaningful smile. For some reason, this spring-like smile made Sun Yu feel hairy in his heart, and his spine instantly trembled. As the premier luxury resort hotel in Lannan City, the chefs here are naturally top-notch. Almost as soon as the small team arrived at the restaurant, teams of dining cars had already arrived at the same time. The fat man who had been eating compressed biscuits for many days had never seen these high-end meals before. He picked up the steak on the table and wolfed it down. He was still muttering, "Boss, it's nice to be in this hotel. The food and drink are much better than at the base." At this time, Song Konghua suddenly put down his chopsticks and said solemnly, "I have decided, I want to stay here." This move directly attracted everyone's attention. Only the confused Chi-Chi was holding a spoon and drinking the soup carefully. The fat man waved his hands quickly, "Hey Lao Song, I'm just talking, don't take it seriously." Everyone also looked at Song Konghua with doubtful eyes. Chen Weiguo seemed to understand something and said, is it because of your brother? Song Kong Hua nodded and said, Adong and I have grown up together since childhood. Adong once saved my life. I owe him a lot. We can't just leave him here. Besides, I am really tired of life in the base. When I go back, you will tell the superiors that I died while fighting the heretics. The atmosphere during the whole meal seemed a bit depressing. In addition to Song Kong Hua's decision to leave the team, it was more due to the lack of a strong person in the team and worries about the dangers that may be encountered in the subsequent missions. Only Mu Chiu and Chi Chi finished their meals seriously. Mu Chiu had a smile on his face from beginning to end. He didn't care much whether Song Kong Hua stayed or left. He only cared about what interesting things he could encounter later. As for Chi Chi, she still didn't understand the situation, she was just hungry. It was getting late, and a few kilometers away from the hotel were the ruins of the city filled with terrifying zombies and powerful heretics. The zombies were particularly ferocious in the dark, so it was undoubtedly unwise to set off at this time. After a brief discussion, everyone decided to accept the hotel owner's kindness and rest in the hotel for one night before setting off. After dinner, Song Kong Hua's brother named Adong led the team to a row of rooms on the third floor. The deep lights flickered, Adong stood in the corridor, stretched out his only remaining arm and said, New Century Resort Hotel welcomes everyone to stay. Mu Chiu silently sensed that this Adong was also an awakener, but his ability was only at the sea level. Mu Chiu retracted his gaze, he even disdained to swallow an awakener of this level. When it was time to check in, the original plan was that Fatty and Mu Chiu would live in the same room, but Yui held the corner of Mu Chiu's clothes tightly, with an innocent and cute expression on her face. Chiu. In this strange world, Yui has an instinctive dependence on Mu Chiu because of the rat spell. Mu Chiu smiled helplessly and said to everyone, How about this, I will sleep in the same room with 11 Chi. The fat man was envious, how can a man and a woman stay in the same room? But he was also wondering how Mu Chiu was so lucky that he found a beautiful woman when he went out to search. He just hated why such a good thing didn't happen to him. Wei Linger was so angry that her face turned red. She wanted to say something, but she found that this kind of thing was mutual love, and she, as an outsider, could not do anything. She could only chop her feet and said angrily, 11 Chi has suffered mental trauma, don't think of taking advantage of her. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xian Yu. Chapter 42. After saying that, Wei Linger raised her white arm to warn Mu Chiu. Mu Chiu smiled bitterly and shook his head. This young lady is really not easy to mess with. Mu Chiu rubbed Yu Chi's pink hair and chuckled, Don't worry, I won't let this child suffer any more grievances. It must be said that this hotel is worthy of being the top one in Lannan City. Not only are the bathroom facilities complete, but the decoration of the room is also luxurious and magnificent, making people feel like they are walking into a modern palace. Tianlai Novel Network. When Mu Chiu walked into the room, Yu Chi had already taken off the black robe she was wearing, revealing a large area of white and delicate skin. The figure of the 28-year-old girl has developed very attractively, and the red tight-fitting goldfish suit outlines the girl's graceful figure vividly. Yu Chi was kneeling on the floor, with no expression on her beautiful and delicate face. She stared blankly at the shining spherical chandelier on the ceiling, wondering what she was thinking. It was not until Mu Chiu came forward that Yui turned around. Her red eyes seemed to contain bright stars, and the girl's heavenly voice came. Chiu. Really, can't go back. Mu Chiu came forward to hug Yui, and immediately felt a ball of softness like mutton fat jade in his arms, and whispered, Don't be afraid, I'm here. Mu Chiu knew that Yui was still thinking about returning to her own world full of the apocalypse virus. But Mu Chiu couldn't answer this question. Because he didn't know whether the world Yui was in existed or not, he didn't know whether Yui would return to the original world when he took off the power of the rat spell, and would turn back into the cold and dull model. Yu also knew in his heart that he was just impulsive to use the power of the spell to revive Yui, but when he got the power of the king given to him by the void genome, he didn't want to take back the power of the rat spell. Taking back the spell means that Yui will turn back into a figurine, and it also means that the last void weapon in the world will disappear. He needs Yui's power. Yu believes that Yui will become the sharpest blade in his hand. After comforting Yui, Yu slowly lay on the bed and closed his eyes. Soul out of the body. In an instant, a gust of cold wind. A group of invisible souls emerged from Yu's head, and gradually condensed into Yu's face on the ceiling. Yu's soul emerged and quietly watched Yui climb onto the bed of Yu's body. Yu's clothes were lifted up, revealing the mark of the king flashing with a dim light on his chest. Yui climbed on Yu's chest, and a pair of white jade hands gently stroked the mark of the king on his chest, with a sparkling look in her eyes. After a while, Yui stepped down from Yu's bed, took off her tight clothes, and walked to the bathroom next to her. As the bathroom door closed, Yu's soul also penetrated the floor and left at the same time. Yu was not worried that Yui would do anything dangerous to his body. After all, the body of an S-level zombie king was not something that ordinary people could easily hurt. Yu walked through the hotel room where he lived, and his soul came to the rooms of other survivors to explore one by one. It was only 10 o'clock in the evening, but the strange thing was that the survivors in the room were all lying on the bed, their eyes closed, and they looked like they were sleeping soundly. I can't tell that the people in this hotel are so healthy. Is it because there are no entertainment programs after the end of the world? Recalling the laughter in the hotel when I first came, the hotel at this time was like a ghost town in the underworld, a silent forest. The lights in the corridor had long been turned off, and no sound could be heard from the rooms on both sides. There was a faint breeze in the air. The survivors' rooms were also quiet and silent, so quiet that even the sound of breathing seemed to have disappeared. Yu had a vague feeling that the souls of the survivors here seemed to have been moved. When passing by a room, Yu discovered some terrible clues. The owner of the room was sleeping soundly, and there was a plate of unfinished food on the table next to him. The most surprising thing was that the food on the table was not the high-end steak that Yu had eaten for dinner, but a group of purple steamed buns full of maggots and rotten and moldy. The owner of the room was lying flat on the bed with a warm and sweet smile on his face, but there were leftover food residues at the corners of his mouth, as if he had eaten some delicious food on earth, and the residues were even crawling with disgusting flies. Is this the food provided by the hotel to the survivors? Interesting. Yu thought about it, and his soul had already come to a room on the second floor of the hotel. In the room, several figures were having some friendly exchanges. The charming lights and the strong smell in the air played together to create a tempting feast like a carnival. Several beautiful women collapsed on the floor, their clothes undressed, their faces full of satisfaction after some kind of exercise. Yu had seen several of them during the day, such as the waitress named Zan, hotel owner, and even the beautiful young woman in a family of 3. There were 2 men sitting on the bed in the room, also bloated. One of the men was short and fat, with a cigarette hanging from his mouth. It was the hotel manager Sun Yu. The man next to Sun Yu had wrinkled skin and looked old. His big ears hung vertically to his shoulders. He was the hotel consultant who sat next to Sun Yu and was called Mr. Hong. Sun Yu didn't even look at the women who were lying on the ground. He took a towel and wiped the sweat from the intense exercise. He said to Consultant Hong, "Is the search team from Yuhei honest?" Consultant Hong replied with an old voice, "I didn't hear any noise coming from their room. It should be relatively stable. After all, our hotel is not a vegetarian." Today, Adong wanted to play a little trick and almost told them our secret. Sun Yu said in a deep voice, "Humph, if he really dares to tell our story, he will be finished." How many women in the hotel have he played with? The boy surnamed Song has planned to stay. I wanted him to persuade the other members of the team to stay together. It seems that there is no hope. Consultant Hong seemed very regretful. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 43. It doesn't matter who else, but those three chicks must stay. Sun Yu, who was pot-bellied, suddenly licked his dry lips, with a lustful look on his face. Those three are all top-notch, and such goods were rare even before the end of the world. Consultant Hong with big earlobes reminded, this team is not so easy to mess with, and they are basically all B-level experts. Sun Yu sneered, of course I know that. Have you made sure they have eaten dinner? Consultant Hong nodded and said, although they didn't eat much, everyone has eaten. Sun Yu nodded with satisfaction, casually pulled up a woman on the ground, and his big hands began to wander up and down. Those three chicks look like virgins, so tender, I have to taste them well when the time comes. Boss Sun is really elegant, so good at playing. Just then, a faint and hearty voice came from the air. Who is it? Sun Yu and Consultant Hong woke up instantly from their joy, and Sun Yu jumped off the bed directly. He looked around and suddenly closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, an invisible mental wave burst out from the center of Sun Yu's eyebrows. At the same time, Consultant Hong also woke up, and when his huge drooping ears swayed, the rustling sounds in the surrounding environment turned into sound waves and reached the ears of the old man surnamed Hong. The mental wave emitted by Sun Yu instantly shook the entire room, and all the vases and utensils on the square table began to tremble, and the women who were originally limp on the ground also covered their ears in pain, rolling and wailing. But just when this large-scale mental shock was transmitted to a certain place near the wall, an even more unmatched powerful telekinesis turned into an invisible tentacle and collided with the mental shock. A look of horror emerged in Sun Yu's pupils, and before he could react, the residual power of the two powerful mental shocks had already hit his face. Sun Yu's eyes quickly flashed a halo to resist, but he was still knocked back several steps by this shock, and his naked body fell on the bed. Unexpectedly, although Sun Yu was bloated, he was quite agile. He jumped up from the bed with one turn, but when he sensed it again, the owner of the telekinesis disappeared in the room. The person is missing. The old man surnamed Hong suddenly opened his eyes, his earlobes trembling, and came to a conclusion. Sun Yu's eyes flashed fiercely, it must be the search team from Yuhai. It seems that they have begun to suspect us. Consultant Hong looked worried. Sun Yu looked at Consultant Hong and said, I was thinking of waiting for them to leave the hotel before clearing the suspicion. It seems that they want to die. After saying that, regardless of his naked body, Sun Yu closed his eyes again. This time, a circular halo like a millstone was released from Sun Yu's eyebrows, and then it continued to expand and spread in the space of more than 100 square meters, and soon spread to the entire floor, and even the entire hotel. At the moment when the millstone halo enveloped the entire hotel, the eyes of countless survivors lying on the bed suddenly opened at the same moment. These eyes were big or small, but the only thing they had in common was that they looked dull and empty, as if they were puppets being manipulated by others. On both sides of the dim corridor, the doors that were originally closed were opened with a bang, and zombie-like figures walked out of the room, staring at each other with a pair of empty and deep eyes, and slowly walked towards a room on the third floor. There was a violent knock on the door outside, and the fat man yawned and walked forward to open the door with an impatient look, muttering, "Who is it?" Why don't you let me quiet down in the middle of the night? As soon as the door cracked, a cold light suddenly flashed from outside the door, directly poking a hole in the wooden door. The fat man was shocked, and then he realized that the knife that penetrated the door was a kitchen knife used to kill pigs. Go to hell! The fat man kicked the door down and shouted at the same time, Old Chen, old Song, get up quickly, something is wrong with this hotel. Chen Weiguo and Song Konghua were obviously old hands. They woke up from their sleep almost instantly after hearing the fat man's shout. When they turned over, they saw a scene that shocked them inexplicably. The three of them saw figures in different clothes walking in from the broken door. These people were the survivors living in the hotel. They walked slowly, their expressions were dull, and their eyes were empty. Except for their relatively clean clothes, they were almost no different from the zombies in the outside world. These survivors held tools such as kitchen knives and hammers in their hands, flashing cold light in the dark, drooling in their mouths, and staggered towards the fat man and the other two. Go! Several people had just woken up from their sleep, but they also knew that they were in danger at the moment. Chen Weiguo immediately cast a blue barrier to cover the three people. Fatty and Song Konghua signaled, and they also used their own special powers to fight off the approaching survivors. The three of them didn't know the situation, so they didn't dare to hit too hard. Fortunately, these survivors were just ordinary people, and they finally beat them out of the room after a lot of effort. Rushing into the dim corridor, the three of them found that outside the room not far away, there were balls of ice wrapped around the survivors standing in front of the door. Mu Qiu and Wei Ling also encountered crazy survivors. The survivors who had just fought off a group of attacks saw the fat man and three others breaking out of the door. Just in the distance, there were still survivors walking towards the side with weapons in their hands. The team members looked at each other, gathered together as if they had a telepathic connection, and rushed to the hall downstairs. What is going on? The fat man exclaimed. They are obviously controlled by someone, don't kill them. A certain saint saw the clue and stopped it. Qiu. Yu Qi still didn't understand the situation. Under the protection of several team members, he grabbed the corner of Mu Qiu's clothes, with a blank face. In this way, the team defeated a group of survivors who blocked them and finally came to the empty and deep hotel lobby. At this moment, the lights in the hall suddenly lit up, illuminating the hotel that seemed a little deep and terrifying in the dark night. Pa pa pa. Sure enough, it is worthy of being an elite team from the Yuhei safe zone. This trick can't do anything to you. Sun Yu clapped his hands and walked out of the corner of the hall. With him were more than a dozen awakened people with superpowers. Did you do all this? Wei Ling questioned. Sun Yu was wearing a suit, still looking like a big boss, but his face was no longer solemn and serious. He smiled sinisterly and said, Yes, it's me. I worked so hard to create such a big foundation in this doomsday, how could it be destroyed so easily by you? I wanted to keep you alive for a while, but who knew you would die, so you can't blame others. What's going on? The fat man didn't understand. At this time, Mu Qiu stepped forward, looked at Sun Yu and said, If I'm not mistaken, this hotel should not be your property. Sun Yu originally looked like he was sure of victory, but he was stunned when he heard Mu Qiu's words. And your ability is not mental relaxation, it should be mental hypnosis, right? Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 44. And those survivors are not living a satisfying life. They are just hypnotized by you into falling into the illusion you created. They are just puppets under your enslavement. Mu Qiu narrowed his eyes slightly, and his expression was calm and composed. Sun Yu looked at Mu Qiu, with a touch of shock in the depths of his pupils. He didn't expect that the young man in front of him would analyze the truth so thoroughly. Then his expression returned to normal, and he smiled, Yes, this hotel was not mine, but so what? Its original owner has long gone to hell. Now, whether it is this hotel or the people in it, they are all my property. Sun Yu's face showed a morbid intoxication, and he looked at Wei Ling and the other girls. Of course, now it includes you. After the end of the world, there are also many survivors who want to resist me without knowing the consequences, but they all died without exception. Now this hotel still belongs to me. Madman, I think he is really crazy. The fat man looked at Sun Yu, who was roaring like a madman, and couldn't help cursing. The other people in the team also looked at each other in bewilderment. They now roughly understood what had happened. Lu Qingfei sighed lightly. She never thought that the hotel owner she admired was actually a cruel demon who enslaved the survivors behind the scenes. The remaining few people were also greatly amazed, but they did not face the horror of life and death crisis. Although there were many awakened people behind Sun Yu, most of the energy they emitted was at the level of C and D. Only the two security guards who brought them here barely reached the B level, but they were far from the veterans who were mixed in the B level Dengfeng. The people here were only slightly more difficult to deal with as the hotel owner Sun Yu, but they were still within their tolerance range. Song Konghua's body trembled slightly, and his eyes were inexplicable. He found a familiar figure with one arm among the dozen awakened people behind Sun Yuadong. I say, old thing, what gave you the courage to deal with us? The fat man saw that the opposite side was just a group of old, weak, sick, and disabled weak chickens, and he unconsciously became confident in his heart, and he puffed out his chest and cursed angrily. Just the weaklings behind you. Sun Yu had expected this, a calculating gleam flashed in his eyes, and he looked at the old man with long earlobes beside him. Advisor Hong nodded and took out a thumb-sized perfume bottle from his pocket. Advisor Hong pulled out the cork, and instantly a faint fragrance drifted towards everyone along the air. Be careful. Chen Weiguo immediately used a barrier, but the strange fragrance actually passed through the barrier in an instant. Suddenly, everyone smelled an indescribable fragrance. Not good, hold your breath. The team members pinched their noses in a hurry, but it was obviously too late. Almost everyone felt that the energy in their bodies was extracted and swallowed by an invisible force, and the energy was instantly suppressed and could not be raised at all. And the mutant awakeners like Wei Ling and Song Konghua collapsed to the ground, their bodies limp and powerless, and they were directly released from their transformation state due to the lack of support from the supernatural energy. I have already planted the eggs of the soul-devouring butterfly in your dinner. The toxins of this larvae will not attack ordinary people, but once they come into contact with this unique pollen, they will grow wildly and devour the host's supernatural energy in their bodies. If ordinary people are entangled by the soul-devouring butterfly larvae, they will explode and die directly, but the awakened person's supernatural energy will instantly become a source of power to strengthen the soul-devouring butterfly larvae. Nutrition. Sun Yu suddenly laughed up to the sky, looking at the team members who were powerless as if they had seen a big joke. A bunch of idiots, this is the price of stupidity and naivete. How is it possible? Su Wen looked at the brown-haired squirrel on her shoulder with an incredulous look. Kuakuo had already verified it before dinner. The larvae of the soul-eating butterfly only have a restraining effect on human awakeners, and ordinary animals and beasts cannot detect it. Chen Weiguo seemed a little powerless when he spoke, and he was obviously trying his best to resist the erosion of the soul-eating butterfly larvae. This feeling seemed to dilute their bone marrow as well. While the energy was being extracted, the body was also suffering from the heart-piercing pain. Oh! Little bug. Mu Qiu quietly felt that there was a lively little bug in his body breaking out of the cocoon, and excitedly wanted to absorb the energy in Mu Qiu's body. But just when a wisp of light red energy was sucked into the larvae, the soul-eating butterfly larvae that had a natural restraining effect on awakeners actually exploded and died in an instant. How strong is the energy in a terrifying heretic that has reached the level of destruction? Even if there is only a trace of the terrible power that can destroy the world, It is not something that a newly born insect can resist. All the team members could not bear the double erosion of their bodies and energy, and fell to the ground in pain. The fat man couldn't help howling, and Yuichi, who did not have strong energy, trembled all over and fell to the ground. Hee, I didn't expect you to be able to hold on. Sun Yu looked at the team and saw that only Miuchiu was still standing upright on the ground. He thought that Miuchiu relied on his strong willpower to hold on and did not fall down, and he couldn't help but marvel. He said proudly, I have blocked all the signals within a radius of 5 kilometers. It's wishful thinking for you to call for help. If any of you choose to join us now, I can consider giving you a way out. The old man surnamed Hong also consoled him, a man who knows the current situation is a hero. You are still young, why do you have to make trouble for your own life? At this time, Song Konghua's friend named Adong also stood up and advised, Konghua, don't force yourself. Join our hotel. The manager treats us awakened people very well. Song Konghua could hardly raise his head at this time. The veins on his forehead were bulging, and there were large beads of sweat on his face. He raised his head and glanced at Adong with an inexplicable look. Before Song Konghua said anything, Miuchiu, who had been standing still, laughed softly. Interesting, this is why I followed them here. Sun Yu looked inexplicable. Is this kid crazy? Just to meet interesting people like you? Or, interesting fool. Next, a scene that everyone present did not expect appeared. Miuchiu actually walked to the side of Yui, who was in the most serious condition, as if he was strolling normally. How is it possible? This kid wasn't poisoned. Sun Yu's face was full of shock, but what happened next shocked him even more. Miuchiu leaned over and crouched, gently stroking Yuichi's cheek, and then a white halo appeared in his palm, slowly flowing into the girl's chest. Ah! Yuichi moaned softly, and then she felt that the severe pain in her body was gradually disappearing. After just a few breaths, the girl stood up with the help of Miuchiu. What is this? At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Miuchiu, and the whole audience was shocked. Cure all diseases, horse spell. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 45. What is this? Everyone present was shocked to see Yuichi's body recovering rapidly under the treatment of the white halo. Healing ability. Isn't Miuchiu an awakener of the elemental system? The fat man's eyes widened, and he looked at the scene in front of him in a daze, and his words were a little slurred. Then, Miuchiu walked to Wei Linger and Lu Qingfei again, and released a white halo from his hand, hitting their chests. In an instant, both women felt that the energy flowing in their bodies slowed down instantly, and even the severe pain in their bodies was relieved a lot. It seems that Brother Mu has concealed a lot of things from us. Chen Weiguo discovered the clue at this time and sighed, I didn't expect Brother Mu to be an awakener with twin abilities. Twin abilities? As soon as this was said, everyone looked at Miuchiu with a different look. As the name implies, twin-powered people are powerful awakeners who are gifted with two powers. If the probability of awakened people appearing among ordinary people is only 1 in 1,000, then even if there is a possibility of a twin-powered person appearing in 100,000 or even 1,000,000 people. Quick, stop him. Although Sun Yu didn't understand why Miuchiu was fine, he knew that he couldn't sit and wait for death now, so he quickly ordered his men to act. I saw several men behind Sun Yu quickly take out pistols from their waists, and with a bang the trigger was pulled. Sparks flew, and countless bullets sprayed towards Miuchiu. Miuchiu released the halo with his palms and stood in front of the two women, but he ignored the bullets that were shot straight at him from behind. At the moment when countless bullets flashing with cold light under the light were about to hit Miuchiu, a huge ice wall rose from the ground, and the bullets hit the ice wall and splashed countless sparks, but none of them hit Miuchiu. Tisk, come on. Seeing that the bullets from the gunfire were ineffective against Mu Sun Yu immediately ordered the awakeners behind him to rush towards Mu and others. Under Mu Yu's treatment, Lu Qingfei stood up quickly, but Wei Linger still looked exhausted, and obviously had lost her ability to fight. Lu Qingfei looked at Mu Yu in surprise, but the latter smiled calmly. With your ability, you should be able to treat others, right? My holy mother. As for these people. Mu Yu turned around and looked at the strange-looking survivors attacking him, with a smile on his face. Let me play with them. Mu Yu put his hands in his pockets and walked slowly towards the dozens of figures, and behind him were the search team members who were poisoned and unable to fight. Looking at their appearance, it seemed that what they were about to experience was just a walk after dinner. No one expected that the one who stood up to protect their team at the critical moment was Mu Yu, a fledgling newcomer in the team. A humanoid monster with a deformed face and two horns on its head rushed straight towards Mu Yu. Mu Yu narrowed his eyes slightly, with a smile in the corners of his eyes, a few strands of hair fluttered on his forehead, and a dense and huge ice cone appeared in front of him, stabbing at the two-horned monster as fast as thunder. The two-horned monster's body was instantly pierced into a bloody hole by the ice cones. This is not over yet. Dozens of ice cones pierced through the two-horned monster and also stabbed several awakened people behind him like a rainstorm of pear blossoms. As Mu Yu walked slowly forward, he stretched out his arms and spread his hands against each other. In the mist of ice, a crystal blue ice spear suddenly appeared in Mu Yu's hand. The two B-level awakened security guards suddenly expanded in size when they rushed towards Mu Yu, and their clothes were torn into a humanoid hound with ferocious fangs and a huge black bear. Mu Yu waved the ice spear in his hand, and the 3-foot radius was instantly filled with gorgeous ice blue gunflowers. While deflecting a piece of bullets that were shot at him, the black bear pounced on him. The huge black bear was instantly stabbed and bruised by the gunflowers, and his body was covered with hideous blood marks. The crystal blue light passed through the sky like a crescent moon. Before he could fight back, Mu Yu's gun tip had already pierced his head directly. The huge body fell to the ground with a bang, and the red blood splattered in the sky, and in an instant, the chandelier above the hotel was dyed red. Under the cover of the light, the entire hall seemed to be stained with a touch of red. At this moment, the human-shaped hound had opened its claws and attacked Mu Yu from behind. Mu Yu stabbed the cold spear in his hand into the ground, and in an instant, the ground under his feet cracked like a spider web. When the crack spread to the feet of the humanoid hound, a huge icicle rose from the ground, and the humanoid hound was directly frozen in the icicle. Mu Yu didn't even look at it, and raised his hand and poked the cold spear backwards, and the huge icicle with the person inside instantly shattered into slag. At the same time, a pair of wings appeared behind an awakened person, and he started to shoot at Mu Yu crazily with a rifle in his hand. The awakened person thought he had seen through Mu Yu's tricks, and flapped his wings and flew directly to the highest ceiling of the wine hall. At this distance, even if Mu Yu released the dense ice cones, he could dodge calmly. See how you can hit me at this distance. The awakened person snorted coldly and launched a strong offensive against Mu Yu calmly. But the next second, the awakened person with bird wings on his back was stunned. I saw Mu Yu calmly condense an ice wall to block the birdman's first round of bullets, and then he lightly raised his feet, and a piece of ice appeared under his feet, barely supporting one of Mu Yu's feet. But just like that, Mu Yu stepped on the ice, and another piece of ice condensed above. Just like that, it seemed that a staircase formed by ice condensed in the air. Mu Yu's footsteps were swift, and he actually stepped on the gorgeous ice blue stairs with a cold spear in his hand and ran straight towards the birdman. In a few breaths, Mu Yu had reached the top, and the birdman was shocked and flapped his wings to retreat. WWW. But how could Mu Yu give him this opportunity? He clenched the spear in his hand and threw it out. In a flash, he had pierced the birdman's shoulder. The powerful momentum directly nailed the birdman to the thick pillar in the center of the hall. The birdman's eyes were filled with shock and fear. He had never thought that this man could be so terrifying. Miu slowly stepped in front of the birdman, his expression indifferent. Then, he stretched out a finger. "Help, help." But before he could finish, a thin ice needle pierced his forehead in an instant. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 46. Gurgle. The fat man looked at Miu, who was still calm in the distance while fighting 10 people alone, and swallowed hard. Is Miu that strong? Chen Weiguo looked at Miu, who was killing people effortlessly, and his face was solemn. This level of superpower is no longer in the category of B level. A level. I suspect that Miu has reached the level of A level. What? As soon as these words came out, everyone's eyes were shocked. Twin superpowers, A-level awakeners, elemental superpowers, healing superpowers, how many of them did Miu hide? The fat man scratched his head in failure. He was so frustrated in front of Miu, a newcomer, for the first time. Compared with Miu, they were like mayflies in the sewer. Song Konghua also had a dull look on his face. When he thought of his disdain and ridicule against Miu before he set out, Xiao, who was always arrogant, couldn't help but feel his face numb. Chen Weiguo looked at Miu standing in front of him and said solemnly, if this goes on, maybe Miu can really grow into a thunder god-like existence and become the fourth guardian of our Yuhei base. Thor. When they heard this name, everyone's heart sank. This is the guardian of another survivor base, and a powerful existence that protects a city with his own strength. The survivors of the base admire and worship him, and countless heretics are intimidated by his powerful means and are afraid of him. And he is an awakener with twin superpowers. At this time, Lu Qingfei had also forced out the soul-eating butterfly larvae in Song Konghua's body, and so far, all the team members have been cured. But because the soul-eating insects have eroded the superpowers in their bodies, there is little combat power left. Miu slowly retracted his gaze from the birdman's body on the pillar and turned to look at a figure not far away. This figure had a missing left arm and was thin. He was holding a dagger and trembling at Miu. You, don't come over. This person was Song Konghua's best friend, the one-armed Boyodong. Miu walked over, his face was unprecedentedly indifferent. Song Konghua shouted anxiously from a distance, Miu, spare Adong's life. As Miu came over, Adong's face turned pale with fear, and he knelt down to the ground trembling, and the dagger in his hand fell to the ground. WWW. But at this moment, the hotel owner Sun Yu in the distance cursed loudly, Adong, don't forget that you have done the same thing as us. If you are caught, you will have no way to survive. Miu's eyes were attracted by Sun Yu, but at this moment, Adong's eyes suddenly became fierce. I'm sorry, I can't turn back. Adong jumped up with all his strength, and his only remaining right arm suddenly swelled in the air, covered with hard and sharp scales, and his fist like a bucket rushed straight to Miu's temple. Adong's punch gathered all the strength of his body, his offensive was unmatched, his eyes were full of murderous intent, and he was determined to kill with one blow. Looking at Miu's eyes attracted by Sun Yu, he turned his head, and his fist was less than an inch away from Miu's head. Adong seemed to have seen the dawn of hope. Kill him, as long as he kills him, everything can be restored to the original state. But the next moment, Adong's hopeful eyes froze instantly. Miu glanced at Adong, and a cold spear condensed in his hand again, and pierced his head directly while swinging it. Why? It was only a little bit away. Adong's eyes were full of emptiness, and his sight was fixed on Miu's eyes. The man's eyes were so cold. That look was like looking at an animal about to be served on the table. Adong's only remaining arm fell to the ground, and he died. Adong. Watching his friend die, Song Kong Hua, even though he was weak, rolled and crawled, struggled to run to Adong's body, and burst into tears. Mu Chiu didn't even look at the body lying on the ground, and his figure was in a trance and attacked the hotel owner Sun Yu. Sun Yu was shocked, and turned his head to see that except for the old man named Hong beside him, there was no other awakener alive. Sun Yu compressed his superpowers to the extreme, and a powerful mental wave with an extremely strong offensive force was transformed into points, all attacking Mu Chiu. But Mu Chiu's figure only paused for a moment, as if the mental shock had no effect on him, and he flashed to Sun Yu's side. Sun Yu's jaw dropped in shock. Only he, who was also a spiritual awakener, could see that when the spiritual shock attacked Mu Chiu, several invisible spiritual tentacles popped out from Mu Chiu's body, offsetting all his attacks. "No, you are not." Before Sun Yu could speak, Mu Chiu, with an inexplicable smile on his face, had already appeared in front of him. Then, a chilling feeling came from his chest. Puff. A large amount of blood flowed out of his chest, and Sun Yu's fat body fell to the ground weakly, with blood oozing out of his mouth. Sun Yu tried to pull out the ice spear stuck in his chest with trembling hands, but found that his body was getting weaker and weaker. What was even more frightening was that he felt that the essence, blood, and supernatural energy in his body were flowing uncontrollably along the ice spear on his chest and into the young man in front of him. Sun Yu's figure instantly shriveled up, but he looked inconspicuous under his loose clothes. Until the end, Sun Yu could only helplessly feel the passage of life force and supernatural energy, while the corners of Mu Chiu's mouth in front of him were rising more and more. "It's like I got some satisfaction. I surrender, please spare me. My power can detect any sound within a few kilometers, and no sound can escape my ears. As long as you spare me, I can help you find out a lot of important information." Consultant Hong on the side saw Sun Yu falling under Mu Chiu's cold spear. He knew that he was no match at his age, so he knelt down on the ground and begged for his life. His superpowers play a huge role in spying and gathering information. He believes that no matter which force it is, it will not reject such a well-informed intelligence officer. But Mu Chiu's approach made his plan fail again. Mu Chiu felt the spiritual energy flowing into her body and couldn't help laughing. Then she saw Consultant Hong kneeling on the ground and kowtowing. Mu Chiu pulled out the cold spear and shot it directly through the old man's heart. He also said something that puzzled Consultant Hong. "I'm not interested in getting such an ability yet. After all, the unknown road ahead is the adventure I want." In the early morning, the first ray of sunlight shines into the hotel through the glass windows, illuminating the hall brightly. The originally empty hall was now filled with people. At a glance, there were over 100 people. However, most of these survivors had dull eyes, sitting on the ground in a daze, salivating at the corners of their mouths, and from time to time there were a few giggles from the crowd. Looking at the appearance of this group of people, they seem to be immersed in a dream composed of illusions and cannot extricate themselves. Wei Linger stood in front of the hall. There was still a large amount of blood on the ground not far away, which showed how fierce the battle last night was. "Boss." The fat man came running from a distance, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and said, "The survivors in the hotel are all here now." Wei Linger nodded slightly and looked at concubine Lu Qing aside. However, concubine Lu Qing turned her head to look at the survivors sitting together in a row with blank eyes. She shook her head and sighed, "They have all been affected by Sun Yu's hypnotic backlash and need to return to the base to receive systematic treatment. Furthermore, the damage done to their spirits by Sun Yu is irreversible. Even after treatment, they may not be able to return to normal life." Chen Weiguo also walked into the hall at this time. "The signal jammer has been destroyed. Now we can inform the base of the situation." Concubine Lu Qing asked doubtfully, where are the others? Song Kong Hua went to bury his friend. As for Mu Qiu and Chi Chi, Wei Ling pursed her lips and pointed in the direction of the ceiling, they are on the top of the building. Wildflowers in full bloom. Please tell me. Why do people hurt each other and fight with each other? A flower that blooms quietly. What can you see there? Why can't people forgive each other? Singing sounds like sounds of nature came from the rooftop. The ethereal and melodious voice is accompanied by the moving melody, which makes people wonder whether this is the sound of redemption from heaven. Dressed in an orange-red goldfish suit, Chi Chi sat on the roof, holding her chin with a pair of jade-white hands. Her delicate face was unruffled, and her light red eyes stared blankly at the newborn horizon, but the singing voice coming out of her mouth was like as beautiful as the sounds of nature. To prove that I have survived, I sing loudly. For the nameless friend. Mu Qiu lay down on the eaves and looked up at the sky, quietly listening to the moving song sung by Chi Chi. At this moment, even the rage in his heart was soothed by the heavenly voice of Chi Chi, and his body and mind relaxed, reaching an unprecedented state of calm. Autumn. At this time, Lu Qi suddenly mentioned Mu Qiu. With a gentle smile on her lips, Mu Qiu turned to look at Chi Chi. Why, you didn't use my power last night. The girl's voice was still so pleasant and ethereal, and no emotion could be heard. Hearing this, Mu Qiu stood up with a chuckle, her slender figure reflected on the eaves by the early morning sunlight. Mu Qiu stretched out, stepped forward and hugged Lu Qi. The girl's fragrant body fragrance filled her heart and spleen. Mu Qiu said in the girl's ear, occasionally I want to relax my muscles and vent my muscles, not to mention. They're not worthy enough for me to use your power. Mu Qiu's soft voice reached Chi Chi's ears, and the girl nodded in confusion. She didn't know what Mu Qiu's words meant, but she only knew that she could come forward at any time when Mu Qiu needed her. This is the only thing that Chi Chi can do for Mu Qiu, the creator. At this moment, the door leading to the roof opened. Lu Qingfei walked up from the escalator. Mu Qiu. Concubine Lu Qing came over and frowned when she saw Mu Qiu holding Chi Chi in her arms. She recalled the wanton bullying of women by the powerful awakened ones in the base. Concubine Lu Qing said to Mu Qiu, what happened last night is all thanks to you. Mu Qiu smiled and said nothing. Concubine Lu Qing looked at Mu Qiu's handsome face, and suddenly seemed hesitant to speak, but finally looked at Mu Qiu and said. Because of Adong's death, Kong Hua's mood was a little low. Adong was also forced by others. You could have done it last night. You mean I shouldn't have killed Adong last night? Mu Qiu asked. Concubine Lu Qing was afraid that Mu Qiu would misunderstand, so she quickly said, that's not what I meant. What I meant is that we can choose other methods to punish Adong without directly taking his life. Mu Qiu suddenly smiled meaningfully at Concubine Lu Qing and said, my holy mother, have you misunderstood something? Mu Qiu's body suddenly moved closer to Concubine Lu Qing. Their faces were only inches apart. Mu Qiu said, the reason why I killed him was just because he was pointing a dagger at me. Anyone who holds a weapon against me will be my enemy, and my enemies will never have a way to survive. That's all. Looking at Mu Qiu with a smile on her face, Lu Qingfei didn't know what to say for a moment. With a bang, Wei Ling broke through the door and rushed to the rooftop. She asked in surprise, is the singing just now the voice of Chi Chi? Just when a few people were still confused about the reason, they heard Wei Ling continue, those survivors gradually regained their consciousness after hearing Chi Chi's singing. Wei Ling looked at the girl wearing an orange goldfish suit on the roof, her eyes full of surprise and eagerness. Awakener. There is no doubt that Chi Chi is also an awakened person with supernatural powers. Wei Ling led several people to the lobby of the hotel. I saw that the eyes of the originally unconscious survivors here gradually became focused. What's more, several strong young people have woken up and are kneeling at the fat man's feet, thanking him repeatedly. Mu was also surprised at this time and looked at Chi with interest. After Chi came to this world, he also awakened supernatural powers. Reminiscent of the fact that Chi awakened the minds of these survivors with his heavenly singing, does his ability seem to be related to the spirit? Under everyone's surprised gazes, Chi covered his chest and shook his head cutely. There was a strange feeling suddenly. After singing, the strange feeling disappeared. Everyone suddenly realized that the strange feeling in Chi-Chi's mouth was the strange energy appearing on the body of the primary awakener. Judging from the reactions of these survivors, Chi-Chi's ability should be similar to a spiritual ability that soothes the mind and eliminates negative effects. This type of supernatural ability is extremely rare even in Yuhei base. After returning home, maybe Chi-Chi can join our medical team. Everyone except Mu suddenly looked at Chi solemnly. Others are also asking for your help. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 47. Until Chi-Chi's heaven-like singing disappeared in the hall again, everyone still had an intoxicated expression on their faces. What a beautiful song! Why do I want to cry so much after hearing this? Wow, I miss my family. All the survivors and team members had tears in their eyes. They were all touched by Chi-Chi's singing and recalled their former family, lovers, and friends. And Mu was looking at Chi-Chi quietly not far away. At this moment, he finally understood why even he, as the fire demon lord, felt soothed when he heard the singing of Chi-Chi. Awakening on the first day of junior high school is a B-level awakened person. Perhaps because of the superimposed effect of the rat talisman, Chi-Chi's abilities reached the B level once he awakened. Singing that soothes the soul? This ability is really similar to this girl's personality. Chi-Chi's singing is like adding a purification buff to everyone, which can prevent and eliminate the negative effects on the spiritual level that everyone has suffered. Under the influence of the prayer songs, some of the survivors quickly regained their consciousness, but there were still a large number of survivors who were in a trance and had not fully woken up from their dreams. Chen Weiguo held a palm-sized communication device in his hand and said to everyone, "I have already explained the general situation here to the base. People from the guards will be coming to rescue them soon." Wei Linger nodded, her pretty face full of calmness. Obviously, this is also the best way to deal with it at present. After all, their team has other tasks and cannot stay here to take care of these survivors. Wei Linger took out the spherical space storage set and separated some of the grain stored in it to keep some. Instructing those who had regained consciousness to take care of the remaining survivors, the team members set out on their journey again. Before leaving, Song Konghua, who had been away for an unknown period of time, returned to the hotel to join everyone. This time, Song Konghua's face no longer had the arrogant look before, but the way Song Konghua looked at Mu was a little weird. An A-level elemental awakener. This was something that no one had ever imagined before. The newcomer who still needs to be taken care of by the team members when leaving the base has become the highest combat power in the team. Even Song Konghua would not dare to provoke an A-level elemental awakener, even if the latter is only a thin line away from the A-level level. However, after this battle, not only did Mu, a powerful A-level warrior, join the team, but they also had a new spiritual awakener named Chi-Chi, and everyone couldn't help but feel inspired. The next task is to leave the hotel and go to the border of Lannan City to find Lu Qingfei's fiancé, explore the living resources and survivors along the way, and return to the base. This should have been the team's safest plan, but the moment everyone left the hotel, a device on Chen Weiguo's waist rang. Chen Weiguo frowned, picked up the positioning device on his waist and took a look, only to see a red dot on it flashing crazily not far from them. Chen Weiguo's face suddenly became ugly, and he showed a rare look of embarrassment. He looked at the crowd and said, "More than 20 kilometers away from us, a search team is in trouble and is now sending a signal to request our assistance." As soon as these words came out, the team became silent for an instant, with complex expressions on everyone's faces. Even concubine Lu Qing showed some hesitation. There is no other reason. In the ruins of the city where murderous intentions are hidden everywhere, there are too many dangerous places. You never know what monster will rush out of that corner in the next second. Even a search team feels that the existence of the thorny beast must be extremely dangerous. They don't know if they go there to rescue or at unnecessary sacrifices. Moreover, the team of searchers in the ruins are not completely reliable. They have seen too many cases of cheating, annihilating, and stealing resources from a team of searchers, which makes them afraid to lend a helping hand at will. There's no need for us to meddle in other people's business. It's better to leave here quickly, complete the mission, and return to Yuhei early than anything else. This was Song Konghua's answer. There were too many things about this mission that made him uncomfortable. Now he just wanted to return to Yuhei base as soon as possible. Concubine Lu Qing thought for a moment and then sighed softly, if we can help, we should try our best to lend a helping hand. After all, there are fewer and fewer awakened people in the Jade Sea. After saying that, Lu Qingfei looked at Mu Qiu, the only A-level awakener in the team. As the most powerful person in the team, he has the right to speak. Mu Qiu noticed concubine Lu Qing's gaze and turned around as if she didn't care. I can do anything, you just decide. For Mu Qiu, the unknown road ahead is the most interesting adventure. He was looking forward to meeting someone who could put pressure on him. Lu Qingfei looked hopefully at Wei Ling again. She was the captain of the entire team. Wei Ling gritted her silver teeth and said, forget it, forget it. Since Sister Qingfei said so, let's go over and have a look. At worst, if you encounter any danger, just run away. The fat man consoled him with a heartless look, boss, why are you panicking? We have Mu Qiu, an A-level elemental awakener here. We will kill all zombie heretics. After we return to Yuhei, we can apply to become an A-level search team. Then the treatment will be, hee. The fat man began to YY. Indeed, with Mu Qiu, an A-level awakener, Wei Ling's team can be upgraded to an A-level team. The treatment is several times higher than that of B-level. No wonder the fat man lost his composure. Su Wen also rarely expressed her own opinion at this time. She held a small hamster the size of a palm in her arms and trembled. I listened to Sister Ling. Yu Qi tilted her head blankly, with the same indifferent attitude as Mu Qiu. Seeing that the team members had already made a decision, Chen Weiguo nodded, in this case, let's go back and drive the car over to check what's going on. If we find something wrong, we will retreat immediately and don't fight meaninglessly. Compared with Wei Ling, Chen Weiguo is more like a team organizer. He can always come up with the most reliable plan in times of crisis. This is also what Mu Qiu admires most about him. A few hours later, two four-wheeled steel monsters that were almost armed to the teeth set out from the center of the block and sped away in a certain direction. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo Xianyu. Chapter 48. Two off-road vehicles were driving in the wilderness under the scorching sun. This was a remote mine that had long been abandoned, with ores and sand piled up everywhere. But fortunately, this place was remote and sparsely populated, resulting in not many zombies and monsters appearing after the outbreak of the apocalypse. Wherever the off-road tires passed, dust flew, as if a small sandstorm had rolled up. I said, why did that team come to this broken place? This is not a place for normal people to come. The fat man looked at the haze like smoke and sand in front of the windshield in the driver's seat and said indignantly. The team spent most of the morning, quickly shuttling through the ruins of the city, and dealt with many mid and high-level heretics along the way, and only then arrived at the mine at noon. Chen Weiguo's voice came from the microphone in the car, the mine not far ahead is the destination shown on the locator. At this point, everyone could only bite the bullet and pass through the surrounding dust. The sun was high in the sky, and at noon, two steel-armored off-road vehicles were speeding along the sand dunes of the mine. Finally, the two vehicles stopped at an empty mine pit, and not far away were several mining vehicles such as shovel trucks and excavators. The fat man got off the car, yawned angrily, looked at the empty mining area in front of him, and said angrily, "What's going on? Why is there no one?" At this time, Chen Weiguo picked up the locator on his waist behind the fat man and carefully compared it with the red dot on the locator. Then Chen Weiguo walked to a shovel truck in front and finally found a transmitter of the same palm size on the seat. When Chen Weiguo saw the transmitter, his face immediately became embarrassed, and he turned his head and immediately said to everyone, "Not good. This may be a trap." Before he finished speaking, the ground where everyone was located shook instantly. With two off-road vehicles as the center, huge fences made of steel thorns suddenly rose from the ground, with sharp thorns on them, which happened to trap the entire team. Just as everyone was panicking, a hideous laugh came from the mine not far away. "Mu-Chiu, I haven't seen you for a few days. I see you are doing well. You didn't die in the ruins, that's really, haha, what a pity." Mu-Chiu looked at the location of the mine as if he had expected it, and the other members of the team also looked in the direction of the sound. The mine was filled with sand and dust, and when the smoke dissipated, several figures in strange clothes suddenly appeared. A man with a mustache and a wretched appearance sneered at the people below who were like mice in a cage. Seeing this person, Mu-Chiu narrowed his eyes slightly, and there was no expression on his face. Wei Linger also recognized this figure and said tenderly, "Ma Kun, what do you want to do?" When Ma Kun heard this, he looked at the people around him and laughed, "What do I want to do? Isn't it obvious? Do you know that the crime of murdering the search team in the ruins has seriously violated the order law of Yuhei? If it spreads to the base, Yuhei will no longer have a place for you, and even Wang Daipen can't protect you." As she said, Wei Linger quietly gestured to Chen Weiguo behind her, and Chen Weiguo immediately pulled out the transmitter from his waist. How could their little tricks be hidden from Ma Kun's sharp awakening team? A red-haired man next to Ma Kun was playing with a flying knife with a gleam in his eyes. The flying knife in his hand seemed to have spirituality in his hand. He stretched out his hand and threw it, and the flying knife at his fingertips cut through the sky like an arm. A gust of wind carried the sharp blade through the cage. Chen Weiguo only felt a lightness on his waist, and then with the sound of the dagger falling to the ground, he lowered his head and found that the transmitter originally hanging on his waist had shattered on the ground. What a fast speed! Chen Weiguo had to admit that if the knife just now was aimed at his vitals, he would probably be dead by now. Zizi, I advise you not to waste your energy. The delaying tactic will not work with me. Ma Kun shook his finger with a smug look on his face, and then smiled sinisterly, "Mu-Chiu, when you offended me, did you ever think that this day would come?" Next to Ma Kun stood a tattooed man, with strange blue-black tattoos visible on all the exposed skin, and the right half of his face was covered with tattoo marks. The tattooed man was a little impatient with Ma Kun's words, and frowned, "What nonsense, get rid of them quickly, I only care about what treasures they carry." The tattooed man licked his lips, obviously salivating over the resources that Mu-Chiu and his group had found along the way. A short man behind him looked at the three women, Yu-Chi, Wei Linger and Lu Qingfei, with a lustful look on his face, and his saliva was about to flow out. "Damn, I haven't seen meat for a few days since I came out. Brother Hao has designated me not to touch that girl Wei Linger, but let me make it clear first, I want to taste Lu Qingfei and the girl in red clothes first." The flying knife man with a killer look at the frightened Su Wen, "Then I want this, I like tender ones." Just as the few people were talking, a heavy sound of footsteps suddenly came from the mine behind them. Everyone looked back and saw a burly man with muscular body walking out of the shadows. The muscular man was holding a bloody zombie in his hand. The zombie had its head drooping and blood flowing all over its body. It was obvious that it was no longer alive. The muscular man was full of blood, like a ferocious beast ready to attack. This muscular man's powerful aura alone made everyone feel that his strength was definitely beyond the B level. Brother Xiong. When several people saw this muscular man, they all showed awe. Brother Xiong threw the zombie aside, turned his head to look at the team members in the steel cage, and walked aside in a dull manner. Hurry up and finish it. Okay, Brother Xiong. Ma Kun smiled flatteringly and looked at Mu Qiu and his group again. I'm only targeting Mu Qiu this time. You can choose to leave here now and pretend that nothing happened, otherwise. Ma Kun paused, and his eyes suddenly became fierce. You will all die here today. When they heard this sentence suddenly, everyone was shocked in their hearts and looked at each other in bewilderment. Guan Muqiu stroked Yu Qi's soft hair, looking calm and composed, as if everything that happened here had nothing to do with him. Ma Kun and the others just watched them from a rock above the mine, their eyes full of the playfulness of hunters looking at prey in a cage. At this moment, Song Konghua, who had been silent all the time, finally couldn't hold back and suggested to everyone, let's leave here. Song Konghua, what are you talking about? Are you asking us to give up Mu Qiu? Wei Ling'er looked at Song Konghua in disbelief. What else? Song Konghua stepped forward, his eyes full of resentment, and he could no longer suppress his anger. He pointed at Mu Qiu and said, are you asking us to stay here and die with him? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 49. Old song, Mu Qiu is our companion. Don't forget who saved us when we were in the hotel. The fat man looked at Song Konghua with anger in his eyes, as if he had just met the person in front of him. Chi still looked confused. She was a little tired of Song Konghua's irritability. Seeing that the crowd could not be persuaded, Song Konghua turned his sincere eyes to concubine Lu Qing. Concubine Qing, they are all crazy, let's get out of here. Looking at Song Konghua with a flattering face in front of her, Lu Qingfei didn't know what to say for a moment. She has always treated Song Konghua as a younger brother, and she would forgive him even if he acted a little irritably sometimes. But this time, Lu Qingfei shook her head resolutely, and looked at Song Konghua with disappointment in her eyes. We are a team, how can we abandon our companions just because they are in danger? Doing this is different from those outside. What's the difference between zombies that eat human flesh? I want to stay and help Mu Qiu. Concubine Lu Qing's righteous words were like a sharp knife piercing Song Konghua's heart. Song Konghua did not expect that concubine Lu Qing would reject him. Angrily, he pointed at Mu Qiu and said, it's all because of you. If it weren't for you, Adong, he wouldn't have died. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't be in this situation. Mu Qiu was dismissive of Song Konghua's words. He never cares about dead people. Song Konghua looked at the team again, only to find that the team members looked at him with ridicule, disgust, and indignation. Song Konghua's expression changed again and again, and he finally made a choice between life and death. He raised his hand and said to Ma Kun and others, you are targeting Mu Qiu, right? I have no intention of going against you, please let me out of here. Ma Kun had a sinister smile on his face, nodded and looked at the short man behind him. The short man understood, and with a wave of his hand, a hole appeared in the steel fence next to Song Kong's incarnation, allowing only one person to pass through. Song Konghua immediately rushed out from behind the fence and fled backwards without looking back. Traitor! The fat man sighed angrily, despising Song Konghua's behavior. I didn't expect that we would have such a white-eyed wolf in our team. But then, something unexpected happened. Not long after Song Konghua ran out of the fence, a steel thorn suddenly appeared under his feet and instantly pierced the soles of his feet. Song Konghua stumbled and fell to the ground, but another flying knife passed through the air, piercing his thigh and pinning him to the ground. When Ma Kun and the others saw this scene, they started laughing crazily. Idiot! Ha ha ha! The man with the killer haircut was laughing with a throwing knife in his hand. It was he who had just nailed Song Konghua to the ground. How can I let you go at this juncture? Are you going out to report the news? You have offended our Shenlong society, but can you still live in peace? As soon as these words came out, Ma Kun and others laughed wildly again, with tears even coming from the corners of their eyes. The words about letting them go just now were just to see the embarrassment of Mu Chiu and his group's internal strife. From the beginning to the end, they had no intention of letting any of them go. If their behavior is known to Yuhei Base, the law enforcement team will definitely not let them go. The team looked at Song Konghua's miserable appearance as he fell to the ground and wailed. No one felt sorry for the traitor. But everyone felt sad for a moment, as if the rabbit had died and the fox had died. After all, they were facing a greater danger. That's the Flesh King Kong Jin Seong. Chen Weiguo looked at the muscular man sitting high on the rock with a look of vigilance and fear in his eyes. He is a veteran A-level awakener in the base. He is so powerful that he has few opponents even among A-level awakeners. He is also Wang Daipen's most capable general. I didn't expect that Ma Kun would even invite him this time. I'm afraid we will have a fierce battle this time. Chen Weiguo looked at the other people around Ma Kun and found that they were all tough characters, and he couldn't help but feel more distressed. A veteran A-level awakener, I wonder if Mu Chiu is his opponent. Fatty also lost confidence when he heard Chen Weiguo's words and looked nervous. Wei Linger had also transformed into the form of a cat lady at this time, with a pair of sharp claws flashing with cold light. How do you know if you haven't fought? There are so many of us here and we are afraid of just 5 of them. Su Wen did not show any timidity at this time and patted the brown squirrel on her shoulder. Kuakua. The squirrel jumped to the ground quickly, shook off its hair a few times, and then began to expand rapidly. In the blink of an eye, the palm-sized squirrel had grown into a huge red-eyed monster with protruding hair, like a jungle beast. Fatty looked at Su Wen, the youngest, and mustered up his courage. He couldn't be afraid at this time. Swallowing his saliva, he stepped forward and said forcefully, I'm not afraid of you. Don't think that you 5 can defeat us. Who said we were going to fight you? When Ma Kun heard this, his eyes flashed, and the joking smile on his face grew wider. I saw him casually taking out a remote control and slowly pressing a button. Everyone in the steel fence instantly felt the ground shaking. There was a click, dust flew into the air, and the steel gate of a mine in front of everyone suddenly opened. A beast-like roar came from inside, and pairs of red bloodshot eyes glared angrily from the dark shadows. The sun shone into the cave entrance, and huge figures came out. These figures were strange in shape and size. Some looked like cockroaches, but their bodies were as big as tigers. Some looked like dogs, but they had 2 heads, ferocious faces and sharp teeth. There were mantises that walked like humans, and even huge wild boars, groups of zombies, and mutated zombies. But without exception, these monsters all roared with hunger, and their eyes were filled with bloodthirsty light. After counting, there were dozens of these heretics. These are all the heretics we have captured in the past few days. The search team mistakenly entered the heretics' nest, and after a fierce battle, they were all buried in the belly of zombies, becoming the unknown heroes who sacrificed in the construction of Yuhei Base. What do you think of this reason? Ma Kun looked at the screaming and roaring heretics with a sly grin. Enjoy it? This is a banquet I prepared for you. The fat man stared blankly at the hordes of monsters rushing towards him, his legs and feet trembling unconsciously, and muttered, It's over, it's really over now. Dozens of B-level heretics, and several of them have reached A-level energy. Chen Weiguo's face was unprecedentedly solemn. Even he had never faced such a large number of high-level heretics. This was the most dangerous time since he searched the ruins for so long. I'm afraid it's really troublesome this time. Chen Weiguo looked at everyone and smiled bitterly. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 50. Mu Qiu, I'm looking forward to it. What should you do now? Groups of zombie monsters were attacking the cage where Mu Qiu and others were, with pairs of scarlet bloodthirsty eyes showing a desire for naked flesh and blood. The fat man held a machete in his hand and started slashing at the steel fence behind him crazily, trying to open a way out. But this was of course in vain. The machete had already made a gap, but the fence was not moved at all. But at this moment, the fence in front of everyone disappeared underground with a bang, and the empty door in front of everyone opened wide, welcoming the arrival of the beast like fish on a chopping board. Ma Kun looked at the team with a sneer on his face. At this moment, he did not forget to mock Mu Qiu and said with a smile, Mu Qiu, if you kneel down and kowtow 10 times for me now, I might be able to let you go. Mu Qiu looked up and saw Ma Kun and his group standing on the mine with wild smiles. Not far ahead were hordes of monster heretics, rushing towards Mu Qiu and his fellow blood eaters. Suddenly, Mu Qiu also chuckled. The sound was not loud, but when it reached the ears of Ma Kun and others, it was extremely mocking. This kid is so stubborn even when he is about to die. The short man behind Ma Kun grinned and said, I'm really looking forward to what his expression will be like before he dies. It will definitely be exciting. Hey Mu Qiu, if you have any ideas, tell me quickly. Our lives are almost gone. The fat man who cherished his life was the most anxious. He had never seen such a terrifying number of high-level zombies in his life, let alone being in a cage and unable to escape even if he wanted to. What to do? There was a smile on Mu Qiu's face, but she walked forward. Mu Qiu was seen walking slowly to the fence surrounded by steel thorns, where an opening was opened for only one person to pass. Mu Qiu played with the wind with her right hand, and the air was filled with mist. A tang sword made of ice appeared out of thin air. Holding the tang dao with her backhand, the tang dao made of ice got stuck on the steel fence. Immediately, Mu Qiu touched it with her elbow, and the huge force from her wrist instantly acted on the fence through the ice knife. There was just a click sound, and the iron fence cracked like a spider web in an instant. The wall that the fat man had just failed to break open with all his strength was now directly broken open by brute force to create a big hole. It's just a fight. Mu Qiu looked at the rushing corpses, raised her right arm in excitement and licked her lips. A trace of reminiscence flashed in her eyes. Once upon a time, as the lord of the fire demon who terrorized a territory, he led a group of young men like this to gallop through the ruins. Thousands of zombies surrendered, and all heretical monsters bowed their heads wherever he passed. I'll wipe it. The fat man jumped up in shock at this moment. You have such a method, why didn't you just use it to escape? But Mu Qiu seemed to have never heard of it. A rare arrogant smile appeared on his face. A flash of red flashed in his eyes. With the dust flying, Mu Qiu rushed directly towards the group of corpses in a few steps. Crazy, really crazy, the fat man scratched his hair fiercely, wanting to cry over Mu Qiu's death-seeking behavior. We can't let Mu Qiu go up alone. Wei Ling reacted and followed Mu Qiu with Su Wen's crazy squirrel to greet him. The fat man's shoulders sank and he turned his head in panic. He saw Chen Weiguo holding a rifle on his shoulder and patted the fat man's shoulder. Then he smiled honestly, Xiaozhu, if we can still survive after this, we must have a good drink. If I die, remember to take good care of your sister-in-law and my daughter when you go back. Seeing the people in the team following Mu Qiu, the fat man shook his head, I think you are all crazy. But the steps under his feet also became faster. I'm crazy too, forget it, At least it proves that I didn't come to this world in vain. Concubine Lu Qing looked at Su Wen standing aside and said, Wen Wen, how are you? Su Wen's little face turned red from suppressing it. After a while, she exhaled softly and said, no, their emotions are too violent. I can't communicate at all. Concubine Lu Qing held the hands of Chi Chi and Su Wen and stayed quietly behind everyone. Their abilities were more auxiliary and they couldn't do much at the moment. The only thing they could do was to pray feebly. I pray that we can win this battle with a huge disparity in strength. Mu Qiu. Lu Qingfei's pretty face was full of worry. As soon as Mu Qiu rushed out, he ran as fast as thunder, wearing a black windbreaker catching the wind under his rapid attack. The zombies and the terrifying lineup of alien beasts shook the mining area, causing dust to fly. Under the haze were pairs of ferocious, bloodthirsty scarlet eyes. But Mu Qiu was not afraid. The black figure cut through the sky and galloped on the horizontal surface. Holding the crystal blue tang knife in his hand, he rushed into the corpse group like thunder and lightning. Several zombies went crazy and bit at Mu Qiu with their mouths wide open. The crystal blue tang knife cut through the sky. The blade was extremely sharp. When Mu Qiu waved it, it was like the scythe of the god of death. It penetrated the necks of several zombies in an instant, and several ferocious zombie heads were instantly thrown into the air. Accompanied by Mu Qiubing's magnificent blue blade and splashing blood, it seemed as if a rain curtain of ice and fire was woven into the sky, spreading over this extreme battlefield between humans and zombies. This scene greatly inspired the team members. Immediately, Wei Linger and the others who were following Mu Qiu rushed into the group of corpses and tried their best to surround and suppress these irrational and terrifying monsters with bloodthirsty eyes. At this moment, two fierce blades attacked Mu Qiu's chest. Fast. Accurate. Fierce. The posture seemed to be the most primitive beast hunting, to tear Mu Qiu's chest directly. Mu Qiu seemed to have sensed something, raised his arm and held the tang sword horizontally in front of his chest, and a strong sound of metal clashing was heard with a ping. Immediately, Mu Qiu stabilized his body, and saw a mantis monster as tall as an adult blocking his way in front of him. This cockroach was broad and strong, with a strange dark red color all over, and two shiny serrated swords on its forelimbs, which were flashing dazzling cold light at this moment. The giant mantis failed to attack once, and almost without any stop, it flew into the air and waved the serrated double swords to attack Mu Qiu again. This time, the target was Mu Qiu's head. At the same time, a huge buzzing sound came, and a huge flying cockroach was seen dancing with its bloated body and swooping down from behind Mu Qiu. The cockroach was huge, its wings and tentacles were surging at the same time, and the tentacles all over its body were exerting force, opening its ferocious mouthparts with explosive force and biting towards Mu Qiu, as if it wanted to swallow Mu Qiu in one bite. In an instant, it was attacked from both sides.